you so much, Barry, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is Oliver, K6OLI, and tonight we're going to talk about Vara FM for Emcomm and how to use Vara FM in the field. That's, I think, what most of us are talking about. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Otherwise, please keep yourself muted, and we'll unmute you when you have a question, all right? So, my name is Oliver, K6OLI. I'm the District Emergency Coordinator for Aries LAX Northeast District, and that's the blue line here. Aries LAX supports hospital communications when commercial options have been compromised. In our case, there are 22 hospitals in our district. We've got about 8 that we support on a regular basis. Then we have a couple more where we have agreements with, and so on. So it's a growing thing. One of the challenges we face at Aries LAX is that hospital traffic is logistical traffic. It's a lot of lists, a lot of medications, resource requests, hospital status assessments. And hospital status assessments you can do on voice. It's a bunch of numbers and a color. It's pretty easy. But resource requests are very difficult to do because the medical terminology, we are not familiar with that. I don't work in the medical field. So having to spell this out is very, very difficult. And one of the solutions we came up with, we are working with FLDG, but the main solution we came up with is actually WinLink. And Vara FM has been an enormously beneficial system for us because it has cut down the time that it takes us to send messages. It's also opened up the possibility of adding spreadsheets, Microsoft Excel, Open Office spreadsheets, and so on, because it is extremely fast. And this is what we're here tonight. Hopefully that's what you're, if you're looking for the flight to Denver, you're in the wrong plane. But you know, hopefully you're here to learn about Vara FM and how you can make it work for your organization, possibly, right? All right. One of the recent projects that we have done with Aries LAX, with our friends in Ventura County, ACS and Aries, and our friends in Culver City, Aries, is we created a Vara FM Autobahn, and that kind of grew out of those large wildfires that happened in Ventura last year, where we said if we can assist each other, maybe it's a good way of doing this, and Vara is a great way of doing this. In this case, let me just point this out here. All of these nodes here can actually reach one another, and we'll show you how digipeating works later on. But there are 3 hybrid gateways. There's W6BI, AJ7C, and then there's K6IRF. And they actually have, all 3 of them have Vara Packet, they've got Pactor, they've got Vara HF, and they have Arden Mesh enabled, as well as internet. But if you can get a message to them, there is a very high probability that you can get out of area. So even if the internet goes down in LA County, we can actually move traffic. And the nice thing about Vara is we can do that relatively quickly. We can also use Arden Mesh if those nodes are still up and running. So it's a very powerful system. And we actually use it a lot for did you feel it reports after earthquakes, after both actual and exercise earthquakes. And what we do is we aggregate and we actually send the information via digipeaters to those hybrid gateways. And from there it's forwarded. It's good practice and it really gets engaged. And, you know, kudos to Kevin, AJ7C, who's had one of the best hybrid gateways. And if you ever want to have a great talk about hybrid gateways, AJ7C is a perfect person to talk to. W6BI has recently put up a gateway with HF, and he is Mr. Arden Mesh. If you ever want to have a great talk about Arden Mesh, W6BI is fantastic. And then K6IRF, he did something really cool. He's using PPQ32 instead of the WinLink suite, because where he is at, he can actually not see most of San Gabriel Valley here. So he set up a node at his friend's Marcy's place, and Marcy is hosting the gateway, but he's got great coverage of the area here. So you can actually reach him via Vara FM on 145030. That's the frequency that we use for the Autobahn. And then he forwards a message via 70 centimeters, also on Vara FM, to the HF gateway from where it's forwarded on 40 meters. It's a very smart system. And again, Lot is an extremely intelligent guy and a lot of fun to work with. And on the top right here, what you can see, this is one of the connections we've been able to make down to Baja with Mike and our friends at CREBC. And that's 135 miles, and we can actually hit them on a good day with relatively low power and on a bad day with directional antennas. And that adds a lot of safety to know that we can get out of area on 2 meters in this case. So 135 miles on a good signal, that's nice. And those are things that you can do as your Vara FM practice grows. Resources, very important. And there is, of course, David N4XRO, who's on the meeting tonight during our last deployment, the return of the operators exercise. That also was mentioned in the Aries newsletter. So if you haven't read that, take a look at that. It was a whole lot of fun. WinLink website, highly recommend you go to the WinLink website. You can get the client software there. There's a WinLink Book of Knowledge, which has a lot of great guides for Packet, Vara HF, and so on. So please make use of those resources. And of course, there's also the WinLink groups on Google Groups. So look that up. And the software modem we're going to talk about tonight is Vara FM. And you can get Vara FM 4.1.2 or 1.3, depending on where you download it at this website here. Just please understand that Vara FM is not backwards compatible. So you do want to be on the same version on all your stations, and preferably on the latest version. All right, a couple of fairy tales I want to get out of the way before we get started here. One, signal links don't do wide. That's absolutely not true. There was somebody who posted about this in all caps at some point. And I found it funny because I read that on Groups.io while I was doing wide traffic with the signal link. Of course they can do wide. No problem. The old transformers have somewhat more limitations than the new black transformers, but it absolutely works without any problems. You need a TNC to run Vara FM. That's absolutely not true. TNC is for packet. You don't need it. Vara FM is a closed system, a closed modem in and of itself. All you need is a sound card to run this. Vara FM works just like packet. That is also one of these myths. They're very different technologies. Packet, for example, you can think about it, it creates a bunch of slots. And so you can have a couple of people on the same frequency and the packet system works it out. Vara FM is sequential, so you have to wait until the previous person is done sending traffic or you'll just interfere with one another. We also recommend that you generally don't put Vara FM on the same frequency as your packet frequencies. That just creates a lot of ill will. We decided early on that that's not where we're going to go in Ventura County and LA County, and that has kept the peace with everybody and really has been part of the success. Another popular one that I've heard a couple of times, the ICOM IC9700 cannot do Vara FM with internal sound card. There was once a ham on it from a local club who actually said that in all earnestness, that he worked for 3 days and couldn't get it to work. And he said this while I was watching the ham radio concepts video of how to do it with the IC9700. It's a fantastic rig, and of course it works with the internal sound card. So if you have an ICOM with an internal sound card, Vara FM works brilliantly with all the ICOMs. It does work with the FT991A, the Yaesu as well, which a lot of Emcomm operators have. But one of the challenges we found, and we have quite a number of FT991As, is that the way that Yaesu conceptualized this, they're actually thinking in terms of you either do digital or you do voice, but you don't do both. And in Emcomm, you very often do both. So it's actually a little bit easier just to plug in a signal link, and all the people in our group actually went back and they got it to work and it works fine, but they found it much easier to just plug a signal link in the back or even a DRA board and, just have a fun time with that. All right, those are the fairy tales, and, we already talked about the FT991A. All right, what do you need to make this happen? Well, it's a sound modem system. Vara FM, so what you need is a sound card. Could you make it work with a sound card in your computer? Sure. If you put in resistors, if you built your own little interface for your radio, you can probably make it work. Is it ideal? No. You can use a signal link. They're very popular. Many of us have them. If you do have a signal link, you don't need to buy another device. Let me just say that up front right now. A lot of the discussions out there are, in my mind, overblown. If you have a signal link, even if it has the red transformers, by all means, use that. Will you get top speed out of it? No. Will it be 100% better than what you had before? Absolutely. So don't worry too much about that. XG Comms is a similar system there. And they're box-operated devices. The nice thing about the signal links is, and that's why we recommend them for especially beginners, they work with a really wide array of devices, radios. So you can adjust that, and as you are a ham, it's a great return on investment. Then there's the DRA and PRIM 9600, 1200 style devices. They're good devices. They work really well. Let me just turn down the frequency here a little bit because apparently some people are sending traffic. The DRA boards, they're really good devices. They have an easy time with Vara FM wide. They're not as widely supported yet, but they're getting more and more support from different software packages as we speak. It's a matter of preference, whether you want to have a signal link or DRA board. I certainly wouldn't discourage anybody from either. And of course, if you have a built-in sound card, if you're an IC7100 or 9700 or any of the icons, they're usually, the sound cards are excellent. You probably won't get wide, Vara FM wide out there, but in a few slides, I'll show you why that may not matter. What you cannot use, and that's why it's colored gray here, is a TNC. They're a different system. They use packet. They're really powerful machines. We highly recommend, if you have them, to keep using them for your packet, for your APRS, for your BBSs. They're great systems. Please don't throw them out. Keep them and treasure them because they're fantastic units. But really, all you need is a sound card. And it works with everything. Just as a word of the way I got started in this in the digital side of things, was with a signal link and a Baofeng and a good antenna. And once I started being able to make connections to gateways near and then far, I realized, hey, this can be done. And I was able to do that with Packet and then later with Vara. And so you don't have to have super expensive equipment to make this happen. You obviously don't want to use an HT for too long because they're not built for these long cycles where you send a lot of traffic. But it can certainly be done. I once ran a gateway I have of an FT, actually the FT70D, just because I had it available and I plugged in the signal link and it worked just perfect. All right. So please don't feel like you have to buy one item or another. You can make it work. If it's a decent sound card, a decent sound system, absolutely. Vara FM workflow, let's just talk about this real quick. You have a computer, right? And the computer has WinLink on it. And WinLink talks to Vara as the modem. So it modulates the information, and you send them information to Vara. Vara then modulates a signal and sends it via the sound card out over your radio, where it goes through the antenna and hopefully out to the other side. And on the other side, it's the same thing, just in reverse. The antenna picks it up, sends it to the radio. The radio sends it to your signal link or DRA board. And there it goes to Vara, and Vara demodulates the signal and makes it intelligible for your WinLink to read on your computer. It's really simple, but Vara is only the modem, right? And for Packet, you have a similar software. It's called UC7HO. You can use Direwolf. They're Packet modems, and Vara is a different type of modem. We'll talk about this in a little bit. All right, here's actually what my gateway looks like when it's deconstructed. And I just want to show you, you don't need a fancy setup to make this work really reliably. This is my GoKit setup. It all lives in a very small package about this size. It's an Alinco 135. They're great radios. I went with a RIM 9600 sound card, which is plug and play. You just plug it in the back, put the radio in digital mode and set the frequency, and you're off to the races. It's a very simple computer. This costs $105. The advantage of this computer is it runs on 12 volts, so everything can run off that bioenno battery up there. And if you hook that up with solar power or solar panel, you can run for a very long time. And here is an N9TX roll-up antenna, which I put at the end of usually a spider beam or bamboo pole. And you can set that up in the field, and we've had really great results.
Hey, go.
You have a question?
No, that's okay. Keep going, Oliver.
All right. Anyway, so this is a very simple setup, and it's very, very robust. And the cost of this is not really breaking the bank. And we have 4 of these gateways now running in the area. They've been running for 2 years without any issues. I'm just telling you, this is one of those things that you can do. Great equipment. All righty. Well,
there is one question from the chat. Someone is trying to get signaling to work with an FT897 in wide mode. I guess it works okay in narrow mode. The DRA70 works very easily, and he's concluded that the FT897 is a difficult path for the signaling. Should we try harder?
Well, it depends. Is it a signaling? And I'll show you in a moment what the ideal way of setting it up is.
Okay. Okay, so we'll stand by for that. And someone else is having trouble adjusting his DRA50.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge everybody has. You know, and we can show you. Okay. We can show you. Again, let's wait for the next slide. I just want to say a quick word about Vara FM levels.
Okay.
The takeaway from Vara FM wide versus narrow is, and I really want everybody to take this in for a moment, wide is only twice as fast as narrow at its fastest speed, right? You can see that here, 25,000 bits per second versus, let's say, run it up, 13,000 bits per second. So the whole discussion, wide versus narrow, and if you don't have wide, you need to commit seppuku, is probably a little bit overblown in my mind. You make work as an Emcomm operator, you make work whatever you make work in the field. And we have lots of operators that choose to use Vara FM narrow, and you know, they've tried wide, they're happy where they're at. And we don't make anybody feel bad about that. So please, if you don't run wide, well, so be it. You know, it's not the end of the world. Quite frankly, you run what you want to run. I also want to point out a couple of things. In 120 kilobyte file on WinLink is the maximum file you're allowed to send. In narrow, it takes 2 minutes. In wide, it takes 1.5 minutes to send it in wide. So the difference there from a practical point of view is very minimal. Does it make a big difference from a sysop point of view? Yes. I think as a sysop, you do probably want to have wide because you have that flexibility. But I think for the end user, whether you use narrow or wide, the discussion in my mind is overblown. You make what works for you and what works with your equipment, and be happy with that. Then there are also a bunch of questions about phase shift keying and quadrature amplitude modulation, or QAM. You know what? YouTube it. There are plenty of great videos that explain it much better than I can ever do. Here's one, RNS's or Roth and Schwartz's Understanding APSK and QAM by Paul Denisovsky's recent video. It's absolutely brilliant. Look it up. It's fantastic. The takeaway from this is essentially using the same technology that your phone uses for Wi-Fi. All right, so it's super easy. And what the levels mean is Vara adjusts to the conditions. So if it has good paths, if it has a good path, then it will use higher levels. If it has a worse path, then it will use lower levels. And this is what the Vara FM user face looks like. And just because I just showed you the slide, people ask, what does the constellation diagram tell you? It tells you what level you're in. Let's count this together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. How many boxes do we have here? 16, right? 4 times 4. Now, if we go back, and this is in wide, you can see this at the bottom right here. We go back we have 16 boxes, then we're looking at 16 QAM, so we should be looking at level 8 or maybe level 7. Let's check. And guess what? We were at level 8 here. So that's all the constellation program, the constellation diagrams are telling you. The same thing for the BPS. I wouldn't sweat that. In fact, I stopped using this. In Vara version 1 to 1.3, there was a point to using these because we actually did something called field tuning. So we overdrove the signal knowing that we were overdriving the signal. And then when we had larger files, we actually adjusted down the signal down to the point where our speed was very high. Vara today does all of this automatically. So you're making any changes on your TX once the system starts is actually counterproductive. So this is not as useful as it used to be with the early versions of Vara. And that's, you know, why later on, I'll keep it on for you, but I generally only look at the audio input, the signal to noise ratio, and the level down here. That's really the information I'm interested in, right? So far, so good. Let's talk about, and here we are with data ports, right? You can essentially make this work with anything. We do recommend if you have a radio, like what was the radio that was quoted as 7800 or 8700? Barry?
What kind of radio?
The radio that
897, FT 897.
897. Oh yeah. Well, the FT 897 will actually look very similar to this. This is an 817 ND, right? So I have a data port here in the back. Sometimes some radios accept the data connection on the ACK, but by and large, we recommend that you use a data port if you have it available, and it'll either be mini-DIN, 6-pin mini-DIN port, or it will be DS9 port like you have here on the Alincos, but that's a great way of doing this. And you can wire them for 1200 or for 9600. And that's and you also have to remember that if you wire something on, let's say, the 817 or all the Yaesu, you also have to change it in the menu. In the menu, you have to tell the radio, use the 9600 path if your signal link is wired for 9600. So make sure that those changes all match up. And this is where a lot of the confusion comes from. There are a lot of different steps you have to take in order to make sure that your audio path goes through, right? Wide versus narrow, I alluded to this. It's mostly a matter of personal preference. If you have radios, if you have mixed radios, some of them only take narrow. Maybe it's better to just wire it for narrow and say, listen, I don't need to have the full 25,000 bits per second. I'm fine with the 13,000 bits per second. So that's, you know, it's a trade-off here. Wide uses a 9600 pinouts. Please, if you have a radio and you're unsure, every radio manual that has a data port and many that don't have data ports have information on how to wire for packet TNCs. The wiring is usually very similar. It'll guide you on your other sound devices, whether it's a signal link or whether it's a DRA board. Check what the wiring that's recommended for the packet TNC is, and then match it up with the terminals on your sound device. That's the best piece of advice I can give you. On narrow, you're using mic paths. Just keep in mind, in this case, you would plug it in here in the front, and you lose the ability to do voice. Either you get an A/B switch, some people do that, but understand that this is not the ideal way of doing this, right? So the volume button may affect the digital audio on the data ports. It usually doesn't. And of course, you need to turn off the mic gain. We've seen that with a couple of people who were very unsuccessful making this work in the beginning. If you're using a mic path on any of your radios, turn off the mic gain or turn it as low as it can possibly go. That will have the effect that on some radios, when you get back on the repeater, people will tell you you've got a very, very low audio. So remember to turn the mic gain back on when you're doing voice. That's why we recommend, if you can and all do it, have a radio with a data port. It'll make your life a lot easier. I hope that answered the question about the radio too, right? Again, make sure everything's consistent across the board. Audio levels. Audio levels are everything in Vara, just like they are in Packet. There are three main ways to adjust transmit audio, and we'll show you the receive audio in a moment. There's usually a pot that you can adjust. In the signal links, it's super easy. There's a transmit, a TX pot, there's a receive pot that has your incoming audio, right? And then, of course, you have the delay. And on Vara, you want to keep the delay off. There's only one time you actually want to put the delay up a bit, and that's when you're doing the Autotune function. And I'll show you what that looks like and why you probably don't want to use Autotune. But signal links make it super easy to adjust the audio. And then on the DRA board here, we've got a DRA 50. On my setup, it's R14 I need to adjust for the transmit audio, so for the output, right? And this big pot here, that's what determines your incoming audio or your microphone audio. Does that make sense? And you have to play around with that. So that's way number one where you can adjust the transmit audio. Then, of course, there's Windows. And you'll have to adjust it in Windows. The recommendation for signal links and the DRA boards is keep that at 100%. On the RIM 9600, you can't keep it at 100% for one simple reason. There is no pot on the RIM 9600. So you can't manually adjust anything. So it's all software adjustable, which is actually a pretty good thing because it takes one way of adjusting or messing up volume, depending how you look at it, out of the equation. And then the last one is Vara FM has a drive level, and there you can adjust the output. I would say, generally speaking, if you have a DRA board or a signal link, leave the drive level alone, set your signal link or DRA to 100% and only adjust the pot here. You want to always keep two of them the same and only adjust one, because if you don't do that, you're going to be chasing your own tail. It's one of the things that we learned in the field. Make sure that you keep these things as stable as you possibly can, and don't mess with the drive level. For one simple reason, if you start messing with the drive level, you may misadjust either the pot or Windows sounds, and then it won't work as well with Packet anymore. So it's better to actually adjust the transmit levels on the pot. And then finally, number 4, if you have a Yesu rig or some similar rigs now, you have to be careful because many of them have Packet mic levels. And so that's another level you may have to change. Look at your manual for those. But one of those things, especially in HF, VHF, UHF rigs, there is a potential that this has been changed or needs to be changed. And you need to consult your manual about that. Generally speaking, though, try to keep as many of these variables constant and only adjust one. The other thing I want to tell you about this, after every Windows upgrade, check your audio system, check your audio setup, because after every single one, it changes something, at least on mine. Every Tuesday is Patch Tuesday. When there's been a large upgrade, I usually have to go in and adjust everything in the system. All right. And that was the tough part. Now we're getting to the demo part. Are there any questions so far? All right, I think I probably confused everybody. All right, let's go through the setup. So you've downloaded Vara and you've installed it. It's working beautifully. In this case, I don't. I have a unregistered copy on here. I'll show you what the registered copy looks like in a moment. But I just want to point out a couple of settings before we move forward to the other computer. On Vara, you go to the setup. Oops, and hold on. There you go. There you go. You go to the setup and you set the system up. Please enter your call sign here. That's really important because when you try to make a connection, even if you don't have a registration key, it actually helps identify who you are. The command port, I'll show you in a moment why that matters. You can leave at the default. Why is the command port important? You can actually run more than one Vara on a single sound card. So if you have different programs plugging in, you can actually do different command ports. So it's kind of useful to actually know what that is. Vara FM system, you want to set wide or narrow depending on how you're wired in your radio. The digipeater only really applies when you have the paid version for it. By convention, in SoCal, we use -4 for end user digipeaters. The nice thing about digipeaters is you can actually triple the range of your system because people can digipeat through you. One of the things that happened during our exercise last month was that we actually took out the most powerful gateway with the largest coverage in the area. And just as an inject, we just turned that off. And that required everybody then to digipeat through other stations to make it to the Medical Alert Center, which is the EOC for hospitals here. And it was good that everybody had the digipeater set up because there were quite a few stations who couldn't make the path directly, right? So this is all there is to the setup. You leave the port where it's at, you select narrow or wide, you put in your call sign, bam, done. Next, you select your sound card. In this case, this is my presentation computer. Obviously, I've got the microphone here, so I don't have anything else set up. I'll show you what it looks like in real time. We usually recommend that people move their drive level to -3 to start out with. That seems to be a good value, and just leave it there. Don't mess with that. The tune just sends out a test tone. I think you can hear that. And that's really nice if you're working with somebody else and they're trying to adjust their BU meter here. You can send out a tune and they can actually adjust their input frequency to their input volume to make this work. Let's close this. We'll show you the Autotune and the ping in the live version here. And then lastly, I want to show you the PTT. Go over here, bring it over. All right, if you're using a Signalink or an XG comms, you're using Vox. And there's some people who are not fans of Vox. I have to say we haven't had any problems with it whatsoever. It works, and it works just fine. If you have an RA board or a RIM 9600, which is based on the same CM108, and I think now it's the CM1198 chip, that's really what determines this. You select RA board, and I'll show you what that setup looks like, and you get some information here on it. If you select the RA board, you close, you go to settings, go to the sound card again, and then it'll actually show you the RA board. I'll show you what that looks like on the live system too, right? Let's go back to this, PT. Yeah, I know that. All right. The COM ports, some radios have COM ports, and it's also used with RIG blasters. You would set the COM port here, select the COM port that's appropriate for your system. Pretty straightforward. You can do the PTT pins, consult your manual about what the appropriate system is. And last but not least, if you have a transceiver that supports CAT or computer control, then you can actually simply select that. In my case, I would select an icon, but you see that you've got the Yaesu, you have all these different radios already pre-configured here. You select the model that you want to use. Hey, look at that, they even have the 9700 now in there. But in my case, that would be a 7100. You set the baud rate, that's really important to where it's set on your transceiver, and the COM port, and you're golden. And for the icons, also set the CID address. But once that is, it'll actually automatically set up, it'll actually talk to your radio and make things happen. Oops. Let me make sure I go back to Vox here, else I'll really mess things up. All right. On the Vara FM WinLink side, a couple of things I want to point out. Settings. The first time you set this up, you go to Vara Tnc Setup. The virtual TNC hostname, you can leave that 127, that's the address of your local computer. You can most definitely use it on a different computer if you're so inclined, but usually you leave it at that, 127. The virtual TNC command port. Remember how we had the Vara setup here? And we had the command port at 8300. Those two need to match, right? That's really, really important that the virtual TNC command port here and here match. And then the Vara FM location will usually be the default for most of you when you install it. Vara.exe, right? And if you're new to this, we recommend that you do automatically launch Vara FM TNC. I usually don't do that because I switch between Packet and Vara relatively quickly. So we kind of call that training wheels, but it's completely up to you. It may be more convenient if you're a casual user of WinLink. Automatic calling, leave that disabled. In Aries LAX, we consider enabling this, especially on Vara, abusive on the gateways. There's no reason to use it to automatically check. I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of using this, especially not on Vara, because Vara cannot have concurrent connections. In other words, you may be checking, let's see, like every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and somebody else has a message, is in the middle of a session. You're going to conflict with them right away, and that's just not good operating. Please listen before you transmit. That's really, really important. But that's it. All you have to do here is click update and you're golden. The nice thing is now it'll restart. In this case, we'll check successfully connected to Vara FM TNC, ready, and we're ready to make a connection. So let me take any questions about this before we go on, and I'll switch to the other side. Any questions? Are you all confused? Okay, let's do some live stuff and see what happens. Steve, you have a question, go ahead. I'll comment.
Yeah, why does Vara call itself a TNC?
Well, it shouldn't call itself a TNC. I think it's easier to call itself a modem, you know,
yeah,
because that's really what it does. Yeah,
okay.
I think it's, the nomenclature would be much easier if people thought about this before, because I agree with you, Steve, that a lot of the discussion there has been confusing.
Okay, thank
right?
you.
It's a good
Yep.
point.
Also has a question, and Jim. So Tom, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, can you avoid the update problems by using a different sound card, a USB one or something like that? Will the Windows update leave the separate sound card alone while it's messing with the internal sound card of the computer?
What I found actually that works for me is Windows will leave it alone if you plug it into the same USB port all the time. If you don't, then you start running into issues at some point. That's the best advice I can give you. What will definitely happen is that Windows will definitely reset your sound setup, and I'll show you where you find that in a moment. But definitely after every Windows update, check your Windows sound. It's really, really critical that you do that. And Jim, you had a comment? Question? Jim, you're muted.
Oliver, you might mention the auto-tune function. I've found that to be very helpful.
Well, we're getting to that point. I was just seeing whether there are any questions about this setup. Steve, did you have another question? Or you still have your hand up? All right, let's go to a live demo and see whether we can actually answer some questions about how to do it, because now it's like, okay, fine, we've talked about this quite a bit, but show me the proof, right? And I have to turn this way because my laptop is on this side. Share screen, and I'll share my full screen here. This, all right, can you guys see this?
Looking
Yeah.
good.
Perfect. All right. There is Vara. Some of you may wonder, why does he have sound modem running in the back? And there's a simple reason for that. I like the waterfall. Sound modem and Vara do, sound modem obviously does packet, but sound modem and Vara do not conflict with one another. Does that make sense? So you can have them running concurrently, even on the same card. But I just do this because it's easier for me to see. So we have Vara running here already. And I'll just move this down so you can see the waterfall. Let's say we want to check whether we have a good path. And you should always do this before you get started. First thing we want to do is to check our Windows audio settings. So we go right mouse click on the little button here, the little speaker button. Go to Sounds. And we go to Playback. The first thing you want to do, you want to make sure very often, if you plug in a USB device, this is the default. You do not want to have this as the default. If you accidentally hit the mute button, you're actually muting your signaling or your DRA board, whatever you have installed. So what you want to do is you want to go down to your default speakers on your system, on your computer, and you want to click Set as Default. That solves that problem. So now not every sound on your computer goes through the connection. The next thing you want to do is you want to right mouse click on your signaling, or you can double click on it. You can go to Properties. It'll probably say Speakers. You can rename it in here, and that's completely up to you if you want to do that. The important thing is on the signaling, it'll say USB audio codec, right? Next, you want to go to the levels. You want to, on the signaling DRA boards, you want to have the level slider all the way to the right. You can right mouse click here and change it to percentage. So you're at 100%, that's good. And this is one of those things, the enhancement button is one that gets enabled every single time you get a Windows update, every single time. So please check, disable all enhancements. Advanced and spatial sound, you don't usually have to worry about. 16-bit, 48,000 hertz, that's fine. And then all we have to do is click OK. And just to show you that it's slightly different on the RIM boards, we'll do the same thing. We'll go to Properties. And I have a DRA board here hooked up. I only have the signaling connected to the radio right now, but I have the DRA board hooked up by USB. Levels are at 100%. Enhancements, we disabled all enhancements. Advanced, we set that up. Spatial sounds, that's all good. You can close that. Sometimes your driver may say something, especially when you're doing recording. We're doing the same thing. For the signaling, listen, levels. In this case, I set it to 50%. Usually you want to go as close as you possibly can to 0. In this case, because of the driver, it just seems to work better this way. Less negative numbers are okay, but you don't want to have any positive numbers because that introduces gain, right? But you want to get this usually as close to 0 as possible on the signal links, on the DRA boards. You want to make sure in custom that your AGC is turned off. If it's not turned off, your audio input will look like it's redlining all the way and you're getting the wrong signal. So please turn the automatic gain control, which is what AGC stands for, off. And then in the levels, again, you want to have this relatively close to 0. In this case, I can't have it at 0 because I won't get any audio out, right? But that's all that's needed for this, and that's the sound setup. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you have a good path. And you don't have to do this with a gateway. If you don't have a gateway in your area, you can do this with a friend. Just make sure that your friend is in a Vara FM peer-to-peer session and his or her Vara is running. In this case, I'm doing it through a gateway. You go to Settings, you go to Sound Card, and of course you could use Autotune, right? I'm not a fan of Autotune. In fact, Jose thinks it's actually better to ping as well. So we are big fans of using the ping feature. They do something very similar. Forget about the tune on the left. All that does is, as I showed you earlier, it sends a high-pitched tune at 1500 hertz out, and you actually see the other side can actually adjust their receive audio to it. That's all it does. On the right-hand side, I recommend you use the ping feature. In this case, let's go and check local gateway, K6YZF11. It's got great coverage. And you put that in, you could put in, if he were up and running just as it is, K6YZF4 as a peer-to-peer station. That's totally doable. I'll turn up the volume. We'll check our waterfall here. Seems like a clear frequency. We entered the information and we click on Start Ping. All right. So in this case, we get information back, right? And it's a little bit confusing at first, but you just have to realize that on the right, what you see is how K6YZF11 hears you. So you're looking at his screen. And he says, okay, your signal to noise is 19.4 and the VU is 22 decibel. And on the other side, the VU is -48. That seems unusual. But that's all it takes. It gives you really good indication. Let's try and ping him again, see whether that improves. There you go. That's much more realistic, right? So sometimes, and somebody is right now just checking. The nice thing is with Vara, you can actually see who's checking. There you go. KM6NAO is checking mail right now. We'll wait till he's done. In the meantime, what I'll do is I'll lower my signaling transmit to, let's say, 9 o'clock, right? So I'll transmit with a much lower output. Let's see whether that affects these numbers, right? A signal to noise of 19.8, 19.4, and the VU meter tells you essentially what the carrier signal is like, right? So let's do the same thing. And do you see how much worse our signal to noise ratio is? So K6YZF11, the VU still is okay, but the signal to noise has decreased by what, 17 dB? So this is where knowing to adjust your transmit audio comes in really handy. Let's say we go from 9 o'clock on the transmit on the signaling to 12 o'clock, and let's see whether that improves our signal. Clear frequency, let's do that. And there we've gone from signal to noise, what was it, 2, 2.4 to 16, and our VU meter has increased substantially from -31 to -26. So we have a much better signal internet. Let's go to 3 o'clock on the signaling, and let's adjust that again. And I'm adjusting the TX on the signaling. There you go, 17.6. So, and VU -22, not a major improvement. So in a lot of ways, if we wanted to, we could actually turn it down a little bit and do that. But as you can see, now we're going to have pretty consistent results, right? +19, -24. Can I live with that? Absolutely. And don't forget, I'm only putting out 10 watts on this. So you have a little bit of a power option here as well, but this is a nice setup. Let's see what happens if we do the auto-tune, like Jim suggested, and what the system will tell us. Again, we're connecting to the same gateway here, K6YZF11. And right now it's sending different packets, and you'll hear the signaling activate in a moment. All right, as I set the drive level to +0 and probably increase the TX, but you saw when we increased the transmit level on the ping, it didn't make much of a difference. So I would say use the auto-tune with caution. It's a nice idea, but by and large, use the ping function because it puts you in charge, the operator in charge, versus the auto-tune where you're kind of putting your, what should I call it, your life in the hands of the software. All right, we've done this. The question is, let's say AJ7C -10, I know I don't have a direct path to him. I can prove that to you by just pinging him. And it says no signal. There's nothing I can do because he's behind a mountain from where I'm at. But I can actually use the ping function also through a digipeater, 11, by going through Robert, because Robert's gateway K6YZF11 has a direct path to AJ7C-10. So essentially, we're also going around 90 degrees. Let's see what happens. And there you go. We have a really nice path to AJ7C in Culver City via K6YZF. That increases the possibilities a lot. And we've actually done this with Mike in Tijuana. So you can actually take local traffic and send it 100, 130 miles out of area using digipeating. It's a very powerful feature. And it works with pinging as well. All right. So we've verified that we have a good path. Let's just send a quick message. I'll just do a basic message. Doesn't have to be super complicated. The message. Okay, anybody wants to receive a message? I'm happy to put you in there. Volunteer. KB1PA. Barry, you're getting a message.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Hello from California. All right, we got the message. We can do attachments. This is not a WinLink class, it's about Vara FM, so we'll just leave it as is. Of course, Greg's phenomenal templates are all available here for those of you who do CERT and so on. Please remember there are a ton of fantastic forms here that you can use, and they work really well. We can demo that later if you want to. Hello from. Thank you, Barry. There we go. All right, so you've got this message. You can send that, you post it to the outbox, right? You make sure that if it's going by a gateway, that you send it as a WinLink message, right? If you were sending to a peer, you will select peer-to-peer message. In this case, we're going by a gateway. WinLink message is okay. You've got a spell check there. Please use it. You can post it to outbox. And we've got one message in the outbox, right? Next, we choose our session. In this case, we're using our Vara FM session. Of course, you could use Telnet, that's internet, packet, backdoor, all those. Vara HF works really well. But we're doing Vara FM. We're going to the open session. And now the question is, where can I connect? If you've never started Vara FM before, go to channel selection. And based on your system, where you set up your grid square, you will get a list, and you can update that list by clicking on Update Table via Internet. And in this case, I've got a couple of options here. We know that K6YZF11, we've got a good path. We can double click on him, and that fills in all the information. We set our radio because it does not automatically set your radio in Vara FM. It only does that on Vara HF if you have the radio set up that way. We set our radio to the frequency that's indicated, 145030. In this case, we check for a clear frequency, and then we click on Start. All right, and here you can see Vara FM going. It's a very small message. We won't be able to reach full speed here for a couple of reasons. The majority of the traffic here is the ACK. So it just goes back and forth and acknowledges. But you can see we have a really good signal here, very tight clusters on this side. And the tighter these clusters are, the better the connection is, right? I can see some of the traffic going through. I think there's some other people sending traffic right now as well. This shouldn't take this long. To be fair, I did ask for a clear frequency. Hey, that's live, right? One of the nice things is you can actually see here that green line. It'll go from left to right as you're sending traffic. It'll go from right to left when you're receiving traffic. Right now, we sent one message. You can see that in the window. And now we're switching over to receiving. And it checks messages for us. And here we've got the window again, 3 by 3, you know, is what, 9. So you can check the levels later. Again, the messages were too small to actually get us into the higher levels here. And we received 2 messages, and that was the whole thing. If you want to do larger messages, then please, if you want to test this and see how fast the speed actually is, then use messages greater than 30 kilobytes. Because then Vara really makes a difference. It ramps up and it sends those messages out at usually the high speed it can reach. So that's great for testing. By and large, the numbers you see here on the screen here, I wouldn't really put a lot of stock in it. If you want to do actual testing, then take a file of a known size and see how long it takes you to send that. That gives you a much better indicator, because these are calculations that are based on a variety of things, and that's not super precise. So don't, I had that conversation with somebody who said, oh, I got like 5 million bits per second. It's like, yeah, that's not happening on Vara. That's a calculation issue. So realistically speaking, we get about 45 to 50 kilobytes on narrow and about 80 kilobytes to 90 kilobytes on wide per minute. And that's plenty fast. In fact, it's so fast that most of the time you don't even notice it. The other thing is you don't want to send large messages through this. Generally speaking, if you want to operate Vara, think of the network. If you have messages that are going to a Vara gateway, Vara FM, and then to Vara HF, keep your messages smaller. One of the transitions that are happening in Aries LAX right now and Ventura County is that a lot of the operators are transitioning from being radio operators to being network operators. You do want to understand the network and how it flows to make the messages efficient. And Barry, did you already get your message?
I haven't checked yet, but I will.
Okay, no worries. But the point there is, it is as easy as that. Remember, the audio levels are what it's all about. Once you have the audio,
can you explain a little bit more? Jim asked about what the proper, he doesn't understand what the proper audio levels should be.
Okay, well, let's see whether we can demonstrate this. Hold on, bear with me here. Yeah. And move this over to the side here. I'm going to see what I can log in to gateway. All right. On the receive side, let me just minimize this.
I did receive the message, Oliver.
Thank you so much. And Barry, you're in Florida. I'm in California, right?
That's correct.
And we used Vara FM to a local gateway, went through the internet, and arrived at Barry's place in literally no time. Let's talk about audio levels, because that's a good question here. So, and just to focus your eyes here, I'm taking out the constellation diagrams, right? First and foremost, the input audio level, that's the easiest to set. We talked about setting it in Windows, right? Sounds. Let me show you what your options are here. And I appreciate those questions. It makes it easier for me. Recording, we go to the signaling, and what I want to draw your attention to, I'll choose levels, is the VU meter. That shows you your input signal, right? Your receive signal. So if I take the line info here and I move it to the left, you see how that needle moves? And I can turn it off. You do never ever want to be in the red here. I usually set it here at the center. On the signal link, I can adjust the receive as well. I have a receive knob, an RX knob, and I turn that to the right, it goes up, and I turn it to the left, and it freezes. There you go. I turn it to the left, and essentially I can turn it off. So what we found, what works best is the level around -13, between -12 and -15 is a good level there, right? You guys can all see the VU meter here?
Yes.
That's your input there. So that's going to be set. Let me show you what happens when another station actually uses the tune function on this frequency, and take a look at the VU meter. So you can hear that 1500 Hertz tone, and you can see we're smack dab in the middle. That's a good connection there, right? And that's how you would use that tune button. But I would recommend everybody in your group set it to the same level. -13, -14, -15 works just perfectly, right? And don't worry about it. And then the output level you have to set by using settings, sound card, and ping. That's what's going to help you set your output level. Just like that. Right? It's as easy as that. What about graphics? All right. Any question about that? Did that answer the question about levels? Could I show Autotune one more time? Sure. There's Autotune. You click on that. You can tune to a different station, W2, JCL-10, right? Just to prove the point, we start the calibration. Oh, I see. I know why the message was slow. I still had the delay on. Oh, that happens.
Live television.
Yeah, there you go. We did respond. So let's try this again. Oh, of course he can't respond. Oops. Because he's net control for tonight's net. So he's using that radio. Sorry. Let me show you. Hang on, let me show you this again. It's also a good reminder to absolutely make sure that your delay is turned off on your signal link. Somebody transmitting right into me here. You gotta wait for them to finish. Let's try this again. And sorry, it's a busy frequency here, so just understand that that's what it is.
And we get a chance. Jim has his hand up.
All right, Jim, go ahead with your comment. No question.
Yeah, Oliver, when you did the ping, and it showed that a signal level, and you just said, and that's how you do it. But are we looking for plus 16.4 decibels? What are we looking for when we do the ping?
That's a good comment. All right, this was the Autotune, right? So on the ping, what you're trying to do, let me show you this. I always try to match those two as closely as I can because, you know, you do want to have, and that's actually been working really well for our gateways. We tried the different connected gateways to have as close data as we possibly can, right? Keeping in mind the power may play a little bit of a role there. But generally speaking, try to get the two of them to be almost the same. They don't have to be exactly the same. Anything better than a signal to noise of 10 is a workable system. I would say the VU meter, try and get it to the -25, plus -5 in there. That's usually a good indication that you're spot on. And again, try to match the other station. Does that make sense? It sounds more complicated than it is. Once you start doing this and mess around with it, play with the transmit and don't do half increments, do large increments, because that gives you a much better indicator much quicker. A lot of people get red indicators on the right. I can't do this on this radio because there's no way I can overdrive the signal with this radio. But if you get red, try and turn down your transmit volume. A lot of people start with too high a volume. So try adjusting down first. If you get no signal, then that's usually too low. All right. And again, remember,
Mike wants you to try XC2BC-11 in Baja.
let's see what happens. Holy smokes, Mike, that worked. So what we've done here is, and I know that doesn't look super impressive looking at the ping, but what we've done here is we've actually covered the distance from K6YZF. I'm here in Pasadena. K6YZF is 135 miles, 220 kilometers away from XC2 BC-11 in Tijuana. So we've essentially covered the length of Southern California with a 2-meter signal. And I think that's a really powerful demonstration of how useful this Vara FM tool is in an emergency, because we could actually move traffic this way out of area to Mexico.
That's amazing.
Without using HF. We can also use HF, but without that. No, Mike, you are our hero.
That's amazing.
And that's really powerful. And please, it's all about audio levels. I cannot stress this enough. AC6VV-4, nice thing is you can actually see who's trying to connect now. But the point here is, start thinking about it as a network of operators where every single one of you, every single one of your operators can be a, I'll just turn this down. Every one of your operators can actually be a node in a network. One of the amazing things that happened during our, and I think I can stop the screen share here now. If you have questions, I can bring it back up. Every one of our operators during our return of the operator exercise last month was a relay station, and other operators could just rely on them to move the traffic, and we were able to move the traffic around mountains. We were able to move the traffic actually north and then back south. That's a lot of power in this, and we all have to work together in an emergency, and having those skills beforehand, trying those skills. I have to say, a lot of groups probably would have had a very frustrating time with the exercise we had. But one thing that happened is when people couldn't make a connection, they pointed that out, and there were usually 2-3 other stations surrounding them saying, hey, listen, I can't hear you, and I can hear the medical alert center. Let me be the station for you. And that's really what this is all about. It's about you, the operator, using the tools of, in this case, Vara. You can use Packet, whatever you have at your disposal to make this work. And I think that explains everything so far. I'm happy to take any questions right now.
Comment from Randy.
Hey, Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment there. I just tried to connect to XC2BC-11. Couldn't make it direct, but then I put a repeat relay via K6OLI-12, and I made a connection. On the right-hand side, I had plus 23.9 and then minus 20. On the left-hand side, I had a signal noise of plus 19.1, VU of minus 20.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And of course, you have those options of digipeating available in Vara FM now too. So if you know you have a known good path, you can send a message through that path. Do you guys want me to show you how to do that, or shall we just call it quits right now? Because we're about 10 minutes over. Steve, you had a comment or question? Go ahead.
On a busy frequency, is it first come, first serve, or if there's conflicts, everyone falls apart?
That depends on the quality of your training in your area. One of the things that we do in our exercises, we move our traffic and our gateways to a voice frequency. And so there's a voice net control. A lot of people have asked me that, how do you run your digital nets? And I tell them the exact same way we run our voice nets. The only difference is, instead of me stuttering my traffic across an ITU phonetics, you know, adenosine, good luck with me spelling that. We'll probably have to go over that 3-4 times. I send it via a WinLink on the same frequency. And that engenders a lot of discipline. We've also done exercises where we divide groups up into 5s, and we send them over to the digital frequency and tell them to wait for the person before them before they send their traffic. The nice thing about Vara, as you've just seen, we could actually see AC6VV, we could see WB6NCT, Randy here, make the connection. They can see that traffic, and once it's done, after we get a little practice, you know when they're done, then the next station goes. You can't do that with large groups. You have to break them up into smaller groups. And the other important thing is you have to have a net control actually listening in on the traffic and calling people out when they jump the line. Hams have a tendency to try and weasel in there, and the other tendency they have is they don't want to be embarrassed on air, and I have no problem actually calling people out, telling them they've transmitted out of turn. And that actually engenders a lot of discipline, makes it easier for everybody because they all get to send their traffic.
All right, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you, Steve. Anybody else? And let me give a shout out here to David, because N4XRO, during the exercise we had, the station he was at had a perfect signal into the medical alert center until 9 a.m. And we think that they were located right next to a church, that they must have switched on lights in the church or something, but they could be heard on the other side, but they couldn't hear anymore. And David, to the rescue with his IC7100, he realized I have a path to the north, so he sent the traffic through us at Huntington Memorial Hospital, and we passed it right through, just like we showed you here. We just digipeated it through, and they got all that traffic through. And that's really the spirit of emergency communications, to help each other out, to talk with one another and solve these problems. So it's great points there. All right, let me check.
We're good in the chat.
All right, any questions?
No one with hands up. So I think we're all set, unless you want to do a little bit more for a few minutes.
All right. In that case, well, I'm net control later on. So you know, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. K6OLI at ARRL.net. I know it was a lot to digest for the first go around. The thing that I want you to take away with is download it, install it. You don't have to have a key to make a lot of this work. Play with it. Get to know the audio levels. I have been able to make it work with Baofangs. I can make it work with my HT. And I know you can do, because I know a lot of you are a lot smarter. So, you know, just understand, have fun with this. Find a friend if you don't have a gateway in your area, and play with this. Understand, put your VU meter at -13 plus -2 dB, and then experiment back and forth with adjusting your transmit audio levels, and you'll get a feel for it within like 10 minutes or so. All right?
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you all for coming too.
Thank you so much, Barry. Thank you so much, everybody from the SEC group. I really appreciate all of you being here tonight. Stay safe out there and have a lot of fun, and we'll talk to you soon. This is
Oliver.
K6OLI.
Oliver,
Yeah, Oscar, go ahead.
marvelous presentation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. And, you know, it's always fun, but I'm just showing you all the great work our group has, is doing. We have phenomenal operators. Nancy here is really one of those people that really push the boundaries in terms of making sure that she stays in contact with family, that she does DP. It's a group effort, and quite frankly, we wouldn't be where we are here without the wonderful people in our group who are really stepping up and trying this out. So thank you, Oscar.
And also, I see that the WinLink gives support to everybody that try to do things correctly, and good effort for emergency communication. Thank you, everyone.
It's a
Good night,
great
all.
team.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you.
I'm going to close it for everybody. Stop the recording.